Welcome to the 14th round of the FDC. This was a 50% race at Monza, and again we had heavy rain during qualifying leading to a dry race. On board with the fastest lap by Dorian as he took pole at his home race. He was 8 tenths ahead of Bumpy Flump, with Meistermeister going third fastest, and Keg in the top 4 for the first time. Dorian here was nearly out of fuel at the end, and his best lap up until that point would have placed him second behind the Bumpy Flump, so this was a decisive lap for him. It's getting away in first at the start is important to run away with clear air ahead of you, while the pack behind are impacted by dirty air. As far as I know, Dorian was on an Xbox 360 controller, so he does well consistently beating force feedback wheels. We used Parc Ferme, so I imagine everyone wanted to commit to preparing for the race. I think adding downforce for qualifying would have been a mistake, although it might have helped keep the car stable on the exit of turn 10 in the race. We could have added more new drivers to the session, but I didn't want to keep making the standings longer by adding drivers. We still had 22 primary drivers and a few reserves, but often some drivers are busy. I decided to qualify on a dry setup for the race and go without traction control, so things were a bit slippy, but it's the race that matters because that's where the points are. Meistermeister lost sound during qualifying and had to restart. There was traffic at the end of the lap, so as I slowed to leave a gap for my first hot lap, someone drove into it and impacted my lap. But I did a lap later, which at the time put me in second. By the time quali finished, I was down to 7th. Monza is one of my better tracks as it's been in a lot of racing games over the years, so I feel very familiar with it. Interestingly, the top 6 were all on gamepads ahead of 2 Thrustmaster wheels, but there may be a race advantage for wheels in terms of consistency, as obviously you get much finer control with a steering wheel compared to a thumbstick. Unfortunately for TJD, he dropped out just before the start. But if we restarted the race to get him back in, then by the time we had it all sorted out, we could easily lose someone again, and drivers would run out of time and have to leave before the end. On board with the Almighty for the race start, and he got away well, moving up into 5th, before getting bumped back down to 6th. But it wasn't long before he was back up to 5th. I'm not sure exactly who bumped him, but if it was Keg bumping him out the way, then I think it would have only been fair for the Almighty to get his position back. So things evened out for him at turn 4. I think some drivers might have been tempted to dive back in, but I didn't want that kind of thing to happen in this league, as I feel like diving in is a bit rude. But the Almighty here drove well, not doing anything crazy. And this is the environment I wanted to make with the FDC, clean and safe racing. On board with my start, and I'd turned down KERS, but I think I'm realising now that you're supposed to start with it in high for a faster launch. A lot of everyone's fastest laps seem to happen when they're held back, stuck in the dirty air on softs, as they all get bunched up together. So I wanted to start on the medium tyre and get clear air at the back, then run softs later on, hopefully in the clear air and not lose any potential time. My view showed Keg losing the position to the Almighty, and then also a position to the Iceman, but he got back past the Iceman at Ascari. Moments before that there had been a battle between Alex, the Bumpy Flump and the Almighty over 3rd. The Bumpy Flump emerged ahead, followed by the Almighty. Heading into lap 2, and the Almighty with the tyre advantage against Bumpy Flump was in a good position to try and overtake, but there was drama as the Bumpy Flump started weaving, which isn't against the rules, but only because I didn't bother adding rules for obscure things like that. So it was a bit over the top, but I don't think it made much difference. He got bumped by a Keg at the chicane and then used reset to track, which planted his car onto the racing line as other cars were arriving. The Iceman bumped into my car under braking, taking some wing damage and going sideways. The Bumpy Flump had a terminal crash a few corners later. On lap 3 the Almighty had a crash out of turn 10, and I'd crashed a few times like that in practice where it's easy to lose grip, and when it's gone there's nothing you can do about it, so bad luck for the Almighty. But he made the best of it, replacing his wing at the end of the lap and going straight onto the hard tyre. On lap 4, Dorian was out of KERS and lost the lead to Meistermeister, but he had a DRS opportunity and retook the lead heading into lap 5. They were both on the soft tyre, and Dorian was 49 points ahead of Meistermeister in the standings. After a battle at the chicane, it was Dorian emerging in front. Heading into lap 6, Meistermeister gave it another try, this time making it stick, taking the lead for the first stint. And Dorian took his pit stop on lap 10, just managing to slow down at the last moment to avoid a speeding penalty, He exited the pits on the medium tyre with 16 laps to go behind Darrow, and quickly got behind him, and it looks like Darrow didn't want to put up a fight. Heading into lap 13, I was leading the race as I hadn't done my pit stop yet. Meistermoto had been charging towards me, and I had no intention of wasting any time or energy defending against him, so I tried to move over for him, but he also moved over to the inside, so I braked a bit early to make sure there was no drama. The last thing I wanted was to break a wing against a faster car. And Mondorian caught me quickly, so I jumped out the way, as there's no point in risking a collision. I'd changed my livery from the Ayrton Senna car, but keeping the yellow and green, which I always race since the Team Lotus days. I overlapped the Iceman on lap 15, and by lap 16 my rear tyres were looking a bit knackered. Meistermoto had a crash on the exit of turn 10, and again, if you lose grip there's just nothing you can do. So I was up into P2, but I wasn't sure where my pit exit would drop me to. To my surprise, I exited in third, so my race was looking pretty good. Although I had pressure from a couple of cars behind, at least I had the advantage of being on new soft tyres. I passed the Iceman again and was slowly gaining on Keg. Heading into lap 20 I had DRS, although I didn't have spare fuel to burn because I didn't expect to be having a battle later into the race, so I just didn't add much extra fuel at the start. I pulled alongside the braking zone and ended up braking just a moment later than I intended, but managed to get the car slowed down enough. So with no pit stops left, I was up into P2 and looking at my best finish so far. I burnt a little bit of my last fuel in trying to build a gap to Keg, but unfortunately for him he had a terminal crash on the exit of the second Lesmo. Heading into lap 22 I now had a gap to the car behind and felt confident on my setup. In practice the tyre wear was a huge problem with this setup, so I was considering either a two-stop strategy or just using a lower setup to reduce tyre wear, but in the end I wanted to just gamble and try and get the best result I could. And I think that's right, because you don't want to just play it safe if you're in a competition, although I've been playing it safe and netted a lot of points in the past. Monza was one of my better tracks, so it made sense for me to just go for it. I couldn't believe my eyes when Mondorian had retired at the exit of turn 10, so on lap 22 as I drove past that point I inherited the lead of the race. On Mondorian's recording you can see, again, there's just another case of having zero grip out of turn 10. On lap 25 the Almighty overtook Darrow to get into third, and it seemed his old tyres were still holding on. As I crossed the line to start the final lap of the race I saw my gap behind was stable and decided to drive the last lap carefully, as there's no point risking a crash on the final lap. On his worn tyres the Almighty made a bit of a dive into turn 4 against Alex and emerged in second place. Ahead I crossed the line to take my first win and only my second podium of the championship. The Almighty took second, and Darrow took his first podium in third. Alex took fourth, Fagweiser fifth, HD Gamer sixth, and retirements for Mondorian, the Iceman, Keg, Meistermoto and the Bumpy Flump. Meistermoto took the fastest lap, and there was a penalty for Keg for a collision with the Bumpy Flump. There were only 3 points separating the top two in the standings, and I was just holding on to third. I hope you've enjoyed watching the highlights of this race nearly as much as I enjoyed driving it. We'll be back with highlights from Singapore as we head into round 15, so we'll see you then.